In a small, quiet town, the heart of a once thriving Christian community now lay dormant. The grand churches, which had once echoed with the vibrant voices of worshipers, were now eerily silent. The pews, which had borne witness to generations of faithful, had become repositories for dust and neglect. The sound of hymns and prayers that used to fill the air had slowly faded away, replaced by an unsettling silence. The faces of the elderly, who had seen the town flourish in faith, now reflected a sorrowful nostalgia. Their eyes carried the weight of witnessing something precious slip away, never to return. It was as though they were living through the death of an era, a spiritual era that seemed to have outlived its time. For Evelyn, a young woman with a deep connection to this fading tradition, the changes in her town were particularly profound. Growing up in a family where faith had been the cornerstone of life, she had learned from a very young age the importance of belief, the need to hold on to the teachings of Christ, and the value of living according to God's will. Her parents had instilled in her the knowledge that faith was the foundation of everything, from relationships to purpose in life. She had spent her childhood attending church services, praying, and listening to stories of faith that had shaped her view of the world. However, as Evelyn moved into adulthood, the world around her began to change, and with it, her own beliefs. The once familiar rhythm of church services, prayers, and teachings that had shaped her early years began to feel distant and irrelevant. The world was changing at an increasingly rapid pace, and technology was advancing in ways that made everything feel more immediate, more urgent. The shift in the world's focus from faith to materialism, from community to individualism, began to erode the foundation upon which Evelyn had built her life. Conversations at school, at work, and even at home were increasingly shaped by secular viewpoints. Social media, the internet, and the pressures to conform to a society that prized wealth, success, and status were making Evelyn question her own beliefs. What was the point of holding on to these teachings, she wondered, when the world around her seemed to care more about what one owned than what one believed? The decision to attend church that Sunday was not one that Evelyn made lightly. She had been drifting for some time, feeling disconnected from the very faith that had once defined her existence. The world, with its fast-paced rhythms and relentless pursuit of success, seemed to be moving in a direction that didn't leave much room for reflection, much less for spirituality. But on that quiet Sunday morning, Evelyn felt a sense of longing she couldn't ignore. Despite her uncertainties, she decided to walk through the doors of the church once again, unsure of what she was seeking, but open to what might unfold. As she entered the church, a familiar wave of nostalgia washed over her. The smell of the old wooden pews, the faint hum of voices in quiet conversation, and the soft rustling of hymnals brought her back to a time when the church had been a sanctuary, a place of peace and certainty. But the pews were not filled as they once had been. The faces she saw were mostly those of older generations, those who had held fast to their faith through thick and thin. The younger generations, the ones who had once crowded the church, were noticeably absent. Evelyn felt the weight of this absence, as if the church was struggling to hold on to something that was slowly slipping away. The sermon that day was about revival, about rediscovering the true meaning of Christianity in a modern world that seemed increasingly indifferent to its teachings. The pastor spoke passionately about the growing tide of materialism, individualism, and instant gratification that had consumed society. He lamented how many had lost sight of the spiritual truths that once anchored their lives. "We are living in a time of spiritual famine," the pastor said, his voice filled with urgency. "But it is not too late to turn back to God. It is never too late for redemption." The words resonated deeply with Evelyn. She had often felt the pull of modernity, the lure of a life centered around self-sufficiency, achievement, and success. But as she sat there listening to the pastor's words, she realized that there was something more profound waiting for her. The world might change, but the core message of Christianity, of love, forgiveness, and redemption, remained unshaken. It was a message that transcended time and place, a message that could still speak to the hearts of those who were willing to listen. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn found herself diving deeper into her faith, grappling with her doubts, and wrestling with the growing realization that living authentically as a Christian in the modern world was going to require a different kind of commitment. It wasn't enough to simply attend church on Sundays. She needed to engage with her faith on a daily basis, in every aspect of her life. As she began to engage in conversations with others about faith, she realized that the struggle she was facing wasn't unique. Many of her peers were dealing with the same tensions, torn between the pull of modern society and the desire to hold on to the values of Christianity. Evelyn decided to become more involved in her church's youth groups, where she found a community of young people who, like her, were seeking meaning in a world that seemed to be moving farther and farther away from the teachings of Christ. Together, they talked about how Christianity could still make a difference in their lives, even in a society that seemed to prioritize material success and individualism. Through these conversations, Evelyn began to see that the decline of Christianity wasn't the result of some inherent flaw in the faith, but rather a consequence of its inability to speak to the unique struggles of the modern age. The church had to adapt, not by changing its core principles, but by finding new ways to communicate the timeless truths of the gospel in ways that resonated with today's generation. One evening, after a particularly powerful discussion with her peers, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the role of technology and social media in shaping people's beliefs. While technology had its benefits, it also contributed to the erosion of genuine human connection and the fostering of a sense of community. Social media, in particular, created a false sense of reality, one where appearance often took precedence over authenticity. As the years went by, Evelyn's journey of rediscovery continued, and her commitment to living out her faith in a way that spoke to the needs of the modern world deepened. The struggles she had faced, doubts, confusion, and the pressure to conform, were still present, but they no longer defined her. She had learned to navigate these challenges with a renewed sense of purpose. Her faith had become more than just a belief. It had become the lens through which she viewed the world, the foundation on which she built her actions and decisions. Evelyn's involvement in youth groups and charity work had given her a sense of community and purpose. She had built relationships with others who shared her passion for making a difference in the world. Together, they had worked to bring the message of Christianity to others in a way that felt fresh and relevant. The more Evelyn poured herself into these initiatives, the more she saw the power of faith to transform lives. It wasn't just about talking about Christianity, it was about living it out day by day in the way she treated others, the way she served the community, and the way she found strength in God's promises. One day while working at a local shelter, Evelyn had an encounter that would forever change her perspective on the role of faith in society. A young woman, disheveled and broken, walked into the shelter, her eyes filled with pain and uncertainty. She had been living on the streets for months, struggling with addiction and a sense of hopelessness. As Evelyn listened to her story, she realized that this young woman was not unlike the people she had read about in the Bible. The lost, the broken, the outcasts who had found redemption through Jesus. Evelyn knew that her mission was clear: to show this woman and others like her the love and grace of Christ, not through words alone, but through actions. Over the following weeks, Evelyn worked closely with the young woman, offering her guidance, encouragement, and practical support. She helped her find housing, access counseling services, and reconnect with her faith. Slowly, the young woman began to heal. She started attending church again, praying, and rebuilding her life. Evelyn saw firsthand how faith could break the chains of addiction and despair, and she knew that it was through the power of Christ's love that true transformation could take place. This experience reinforced something Evelyn had come to understand over the years. Christianity was not just a set of beliefs or practices. It was a way of life that had the power to change the world. The message of love, forgiveness, and redemption was not confined to ancient texts. It was alive, living within the hearts of those who chose to follow Christ. Evelyn believed that the revival of Christianity was not just about returning to old traditions, but about breathing new life into the faith, making it relevant to the struggles and challenges of today's world. Evelyn had long come to understand that the journey of faith was never straightforward. It wasn't a simple matter of just believing or attending church. It was about truly embodying the values of Christianity in every area of life. Her journey had become one of personal growth, of rediscovery, but also of significant transformation. Through her renewed faith, Evelyn began to see her world in a completely new light, recognizing the deep needs of her community and her role in addressing those needs. Over the years, Evelyn had seen the erosion of trust in Christian institutions. The church, once a central pillar in society, had slowly become disconnected from the people it was meant to serve. Many saw it as an institution out of touch with the modern world, outdated and irrelevant. But Evelyn refused to accept that narrative. She believed deeply that the core message of Christianity, the message of love, compassion, forgiveness, and redemption, was timeless. What was needed, she realized, was not a change in the message itself, but in the way it was communicated. The church needed to meet people where they were, to offer a message of hope and healing in a way that made sense in a modern context. This realization led Evelyn to develop a new approach to her faith, one that emphasized action over words, service over sermons. She knew that simply preaching to the choir was not enough. It was essential to engage with the world in a way that demonstrated the relevance of the gospel. She began working more closely with local charities, focusing on practical efforts to serve the community. She offered assistance to those facing addiction, poverty, and mental health challenges. Through her involvement, Evelyn saw how deeply ingrained societal issues could be in the lives of individuals. She saw the hopelessness in the eyes of the people who came through the shelter doors, and she realized that her role was not to judge, but to offer a path to redemption. Her work with those struggling with addiction proved to be especially eye-opening. Evelyn had always known that faith could transform lives, but seeing it firsthand was an entirely different experience. One particular case stood out: a young man named Jacob, who had battled substance abuse for years. Jacob had been to rehab multiple times, but every time he relapsed, he sank deeper into despair. When he entered the shelter where Evelyn volunteered, he was at his lowest point. But instead of turning away, Evelyn embraced him. She offered him not just words of comfort, but tangible help, access to counseling, a safe place to stay, and a community that would support him as he worked through his struggles. As Evelyn's journey continued, she found herself increasingly aware of the broader challenge of living out her Christian faith in a world that seemed to value everything but the things of God. The pressures of modern life, materialism, instant gratification, and the obsession with individual success had left many people feeling spiritually empty. Yet Evelyn had come to believe that it was precisely in these challenging times that the message of Christianity had the most power. It was not just about a set of beliefs, but about a way of living that could transform individuals and communities. Evelyn understood that living out her faith meant more than just going to church on Sunday. It meant bringing the gospel into every area of her life. It was about showing love and kindness to those around her, living with integrity in her work, and treating others with the same compassion and grace that Christ had shown her. She knew that to make the message of Christianity relevant in the modern world, it had to be lived out authentically. It was no longer enough to simply talk about the gospel. It had to be demonstrated through action. She began to focus more on her relationships, especially those with people outside of her faith circle. Evelyn realized that the people who needed to hear the message of Christ the most were often the ones who felt the most distant from it. She became involved in outreach programs that sought to build bridges between different communities, bridges of understanding, compassion, and support. Whether it was working with refugees, mentoring at-risk youth, or helping families in need, Evelyn made it her mission to embody the love and grace of Christ in everything she did. One of the most profound ways Evelyn saw the gospel come alive was through her work with the homeless population. Every week, she volunteered at a local shelter where she met people who had been cast aside by society. Many had fallen into addiction, suffered from mental health issues, or simply had nowhere else to turn. Evelyn knew that these people were not defined by their circumstances, but by their inherent worth as children of God. She spent time listening to their stories, offering them a kind word, and most importantly, showing them that they mattered. It was through these simple acts of kindness that Evelyn saw the gospel come to life. By treating others with dignity and compassion, she was living out the very essence of the teachings of Christ. As Evelyn continued to immerse herself in service, she began to see the broader impact of living out her faith, not just on an individual level, but on the entire community. The more she poured herself into helping others, the more she saw how interconnected everything truly was. Her journey wasn't just about restoring her own faith, it was about bringing healing to the brokenness in her community and the world around her. She began to see that, in many ways, true faith could be the catalyst for deep, lasting change. Evelyn's involvement in local outreach programs gave her a clear perspective on the challenges her community was facing. One of the most pressing issues was the growing sense of division, social, economic, and racial. People were increasingly isolated from one another, often siloed by their differences. The church, once a unifying force, had become fragmented, much like the world outside it. This troubled Evelyn deeply. She had always believed that the teachings of Christ were not just about personal salvation, but about building a more just, loving, and united society. She started attending and eventually organizing community gatherings that focused on bringing people together, regardless of background, to discuss faith, healing, and unity. These gatherings weren't just about listening to sermons or having theological discussions. They were about fostering relationships, getting to know one another on a personal level, sharing stories and learning from each other's experiences. Evelyn realized that, at its core, faith wasn't just about individual belief, but about communal transformation. She could see how the power of the gospel could work to heal divisions, break down barriers, and bring people together in a way that nothing else could. Through these gatherings, Evelyn met people from all walks of life, some who had been Christians for years, and others who were seeking something deeper, something meaningful in their lives. Each person brought their own perspective, their own story, and their own struggles. And as they came together, sharing their faith and supporting one another, Evelyn saw how the message of love, forgiveness, and redemption had the power to transcend the barriers that had divided them. The church, she realized, had the potential to be a powerful force for healing and unity, but it required a shift in perspective. It wasn't about keeping the message inside the walls of the church. It was about taking it into the community and letting it shape everything around them. As Evelyn continued her mission to live out her faith and work for the transformation of her community, she realized that there was still much more to be done. The path to revitalizing Christianity in the modern world was not an easy one. It required both personal sacrifice and collective action. The challenges of modern society, individualism, materialism, and a growing sense of disconnection made it difficult for many to understand the true depth of the Christian message. For Evelyn, however, the call was clear. She was not only responsible for her own journey of faith, but also for helping others to rediscover the power of Christianity and the hope it offered. In her work, Evelyn had seen how deeply the world's distractions could pull people away from what truly mattered. People were often overwhelmed by the pressures of daily life, caught in the pursuit of success, status, and wealth. Faith had become something people turned to in times of crisis, but outside of those moments, it was often relegated to the background, overshadowed by the demands of modern life. Evelyn saw this as one of the greatest challenges facing Christianity today. The message of the gospel, she believed, had not lost its relevance. It had simply been overshadowed by a world that valued everything but the things of God. This realization led her to a new understanding of what revival truly meant. Revival wasn't just about bringing people back to church. It was about bringing them back to the heart of the gospel, to the transformative power of Christ's love. It was about rekindling the fire of faith in the hearts of individuals and communities, about helping people see that the message of Christianity was not just for Sunday mornings, but for every day of the week. Evelyn began to see her mission more clearly. She wasn't just trying to save souls, but to reignite a movement, to bring people back to the realization that the love of Christ was the only thing that could truly satisfy the longings of their hearts. Evelyn had come a long way from the uncertain, questioning young woman she had once been. Her journey had been filled with doubts, challenges, and moments of despair, but it had also been filled with growth, purpose, and an unwavering belief in the power of Christ's love. She had rediscovered her faith and had found a deep sense of peace and fulfillment in living it out authentically. But the journey was far from over. Evelyn understood that faith was not a destination. It was a continuous, ever-evolving process of growth, learning, and transformation. As she looked back on everything she had experienced, Evelyn felt a sense of gratitude for the struggles that had shaped her. Her doubts and fears had led her to a deeper understanding of her faith. The challenges she had faced had strengthened her resolve, and the people she had encountered along the way, those she had served and those who had supported her, had helped her see the true power of community and love. Evelyn had come to realize that faith was never meant to be lived in isolation. It was meant to be shared, nurtured, and lived out together. Through her work in her community, Evelyn had seen how faith could transform not only individuals but entire societies. The programs she had helped organize, the outreach efforts she had initiated, and the relationships she had built had all contributed to the revival she had been seeking. But Evelyn knew that this was just the beginning. The world was still filled with brokenness, pain, and confusion. There was still much work to be done. The message of love, redemption, and forgiveness had to be shared with those who had not yet encountered it, and the church had to continue to evolve in order to meet the needs of the modern world. Evelyn's commitment to this cause remained as strong as ever. She had seen firsthand the difference that living out the gospel could make, and she was determined to continue making an impact. The path to revival was not an easy one, and it required hard work, dedication, and a willingness to face the challenges head-on. But Evelyn knew that with each step, she was drawing closer to her ultimate purpose, to help bring others into the fullness of the love and grace of Christ. As she continued her work, Evelyn began to focus more on the next generation. She knew that the key to ensuring the lasting impact of revival was to instill a deep, authentic faith in young people. She began to mentor and guide younger individuals, helping them navigate the challenges they faced in their own faith journeys. Evelyn shared with them the lessons she had learned, the importance of remaining steadfast in faith, the need to serve others, and the power of community. She encouraged them to embrace the gospel, not as a set of rules or obligations, but as a living, breathing message of hope that could transform every area of their lives. Evelyn's journey was a testament to the enduring power of faith. From a young woman struggling with doubt and confusion to a leader working to ignite revival within her community, her story revealed the transformative potential of living out Christianity authentically in a modern world. But Evelyn knew that while her personal journey had brought her a deep sense of fulfillment, it was only the beginning. The work of revival was ongoing, a process that would continue to unfold as long as she breathed. Her experience taught her that faith isn't a static belief or a simple set of rules. It is a living, breathing force that shapes every area of life, if we allow it to. Evelyn's story was not just about her own redemption. It was about offering others the opportunity to experience the same grace, love, and forgiveness that she had encountered. As she reached out to the broken, the lost, and the disillusioned, Evelyn saw the power of Christ's love to heal wounds, restore dignity, and transform lives. But she also understood that true transformation required more than just good intentions. It required action. The message Evelyn sought to spread was one that called people to both individual and collective change. The message of love, redemption, and forgiveness was not just meant to be a personal conviction. It had to extend into the world around us. Communities, she knew, could not truly experience revival unless they were willing to engage with each other in a spirit of love and service. Christianity, in its truest form, was not a solitary faith, but one meant to be shared, lived out together, and offered to those in need. Evelyn had seen firsthand how faith could be the catalyst for change. Her work with those struggling with addiction, poverty, and homelessness had shown her that true transformation was possible, but it required commitment, support, and above all, patience. It wasn't always easy. There were times when she faced setbacks, when her efforts seemed fruitless, when the world around her felt overwhelming and indifferent. But through it all, Evelyn found strength in knowing that the work of revival was never in vain. Even the smallest acts of service, the smallest gestures of kindness, could create ripples that transformed lives. Each person who encountered the love of Christ, whether it was through her words or through her actions, had the potential to change the world around them.